And I was pretty much not paying attention to politics, local politics, until I started agitating about the streets in Menlo Park. And I started attending, as the video said, meeting after meeting, and sitting there in council chambers waiting for the agenda item that you showed up for to appear. You start listening to all the other things happening in town, and you start realizing that everything is interconnected. And so really through this process over the last 4 years, my interest and the issues that I've been tracking have exponentially grown. And it started making the most sense to go from being an advocate to being a policymaker and a decision maker, so that the values that I care deeply about are reflected in my city. And I do understand this is a privilege that I have the time and the resources to do something like this. And I find this work incredibly meaningful. I feel a calling to serve. I feel like kind of this is what all my education and life experience has led me to do. And I'm just so excited to have this opportunity. Campaigning during COVID is really interesting, as we are all living through COVID. Before COVID hit, I was lucky enough to start my campaign pretty early. In January, I sent out that I'm running email and started on a listening campaign. And luckily, before the shelter-in-place order was placed, I'd managed to go door to door to 20% of District 3 and talk to all kinds of people. I also got to have one in-person house party at Betty Ann Nice-Wonger's house on Marcuson and meet with some neighbors like that. And that was kind of the plan I had all along. So COVID's definitely changed that, but I am grateful that I had the opportunity to get out there and walk. I got to meet Desta, who was featured in the video, talking about the bike path and the ped path to Palo Alto and making sure that was safe, especially for women to walk at night. I got to walk around Felton Gables with Ken to discuss grade separation. Katie, we talked about trees and the sidewalks in Linfield Oaks. Margot and I took a walk at Bedwell Bayfront Park and talked a lot about equity in Bellhaven. And it was really exciting to see all the different types of ways people are living in Menlo Park. District 3 is incredibly diverse. About 50% of the district is apartments. And some of these places are super cool. So getting to go door to door and kind of peering in and seeing what people are doing was really exciting. Now everything's virtual, thus our virtual kickoff event. And so I've really shifted to doing online listening sessions, and I'm going to be starting a weekly brown bag lunch sessions where people can drop in and talk to me about whatever they want. And it's different online, but it's also the same. I mean, it's still about listening, engaging, understanding the issues. And on that sense, I'm ready. And I really believe that leadership is more important now, given all of the challenges we have. And to me, leadership means having a process, a thoughtful way of examining the issues, having core values and a lens that you can apply to those issues, because none of these issues are easy, and knowing how to bring the community along with you on your journey. And that's something that I really feel my organizing experience with Safe Routes and community grassroots organizing has really set me up to do well, is to lead the community together. And leading is really what this election is about. And this year, 2020, November, holy cow, like we've got a lot going on nationwide, but local elections matter. And the national scene can be polarizing, definitely, but also paralyzing. And we have an opportunity to really apply a lot of our values and see the change we want locally. And the city council in any city, and I know there's people dialing in from all over, it's so great to see all of you, but really city councils have the local ability to enact a lot of change that can make a difference. And the two greatest lenses that I see myself applying in my role, if I'm lucky enough to win a seat on city council, is a sustainability and an equity lens. As I've mentioned, I have two kids, a 12-year-old girl who's at Hillview and a 10-year-old boy at Laurel. And when I think of the work I do and what gets me going day after day, it's thinking about the world I want my kids to live in. And there's things that are, happening in our country and with climate and equity and everything that make me really, when I go to bed at night, think, what have I done today to try to make this world a little bit better? So that's kind of a little bit of a background. I know, Rachel, you wanted to ask some questions, so I will turn it back to you, but I have an ability to talk on and on forever. So cut me off if I'm going too much.
Will do. No, but thank you, Jen. That was great. The questions are not coming from me. They're a compilation of questions that we received, as I said, from the RSVP entries. And hopefully we can cover it all in a short period of time.
I'll go fast.
So the first question is getting at what is on the minds of a lot of people right now, and that is the images of violence we've seen against Black Americans, particularly with the recent incident with George Floyd, conversations about racial inequity, conversations about anti-racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, which has touched people in this community, as we've seen, taking to the streets, and having this conversation about police reform and about their relationship with community members. And so let's hear your thoughts on that and how to address that at the local level.
Yeah, that's a big question. And let me first start off by saying that the murder of George Floyd and others is horrible and unacceptable. And Black lives do matter. But it's important to recognize that the problems that are surfacing right now are not new. This isn't the first Black man, to be killed at the hands of the police, or the first injustice that has occurred. These have been going on for 400 years. Our country was really founded with slavery. And so it's important to acknowledge that it's good that people are talking about it now, but this conversation is long overdue. And I have been listening in and following, obviously what's happening nationally and also what's been happening locally. And the city of Menlo Park did some town halls recently on this topic, and they were very eye-opening. People called in to describe their experiences in Menlo Park of being pulled over by the police and how life-shattering that was for them. For doing basically absolutely nothing. And so this isn't just a problem that's happening, thousands of miles away. This is real, and this is happening in Menlo Park. And last night, City Council member Mueller held a panel on this topic, and one of the people talking was a mother up in Sharon Heights who has a biracial son who was talking about their experiences. So this is really real. It's happening all over. And we absolutely need to talk about police reform. And actually on Tuesday night, the City Council will be discussing this. So I encourage all of you interested in this topic to tune into the City Council on Tuesday. And I've been following, the 8 Can't Wait campaign, reading a lot about the concept of unbundling. So looking at the activities that the police currently do and trying to see if there's a way to take out maybe mental health services, traffic stops, school resource officers that are currently in our schools. What of those actions are appropriate for police to be conducting, and what can be migrated into kind of less lethal, less violent ways. And I get that there's an urgency to act now. There's a window of people paying attention to this topic. So this isn't something that can wait, but it's also something that needs to be studied carefully. Minneapolis has been taking action, Oregon, Berkeley. So there's a lot of best practices to pay attention to. The other thing I think that's important when we talk about police reform, it's not just about the police. The police are a reflection of our society. And police have pretty much been doing the will of the people in the towns that they serve. And there was a important op-ed yesterday in the New York Times that I encourage you all to read from the former mayor of Minneapolis, Betsy Hodges. And I just want to read a piece that jumped out at me. She said, "I can say that white liberals, despite believing we are saying and doing the right things, have resisted the systemic changes our cities have needed for decades. We've mostly settled for illusions of change, like testing pilot programs and funding volunteer opportunities. These efforts make us feel better, but fundamentally change little for the communities of color whose disadvantages often come from hoarding the advantages for mostly white neighborhoods." So the whole idea of this being a systemic issue is real. It's pervasive in all institutions in our society. Yes, the police, also in education, criminal justice. But when I think of it locally, I think of what are the levers that a city council member can pull to affect change. And the biggest piece of change that I can think of to make our society more equitable is zoning. And it's where we allow housing and who gets to live where. So I really think that housing, I know this question started off as a police reform and Black Lives Matter, but all these issues are interconnected. So to me, really learning about the history of the housing in our country and in Menlo Park, much of Menlo Park was redlined, and Menlo Together put on a phenomenal program back in November called the Hidden Menlo, the Color of Law Menlo Park Edition. And it was really eye-opening to see how the impact of Black people not being able to buy in certain neighborhoods has impacted their outcomes today, and what that wealth gap, how it started and how it's being played out now. So it's really about making sure that people of all income levels, because we know that people didn't all start in the same place, can live throughout the city. So to me, it's really a housing issue. And so kind of jumping to another issue, so housing, I really believe, and this was something I've put on my website from the beginning, that we need housing at all income levels throughout Menlo Park. We need to look at more housing by transit, but we really need to look at more housing everywhere. And I mentioned that I had a house party on Marcuson Drive in District 3. And Marcuson is an amazing street. It's filled with duplexes. And what's lovely about Marcuson is that people of all different ages and incomes can live there. There's quite a few multi-generational homes where you have one set of family living in one of the units and another set of family. And that really brings out the best in that neighborhood, and that community is amazing. I think we need more Marcusons in Menlo Park. So that's how I see police reform. Kind of gets back to housing, but it all gets back to housing, I think.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, just to time check ourselves, we do have a few minutes left. So how about another big question? A lot of people asked about the other thing that is on everyone's mind, and that's the response to COVID-19 and what that has done to everyone's lives, upended everyone's lives. Can you talk about how it's affecting the city and how city leaders have to approach it?
Yeah, I don't know. For those of you in Menlo Park, or actually in San Mateo County, like an hour ago, I got an alert on my phone that the county was going to be moving to more restrictive guidelines. So the issue with COVID is dynamic. It changes minute by minute. The science is evolving. You know, this week, I think it was this week, maybe last week, time is confusing now, but a bunch of scientists now are saying that COVID is airborne. One thing we know is that we need to wear our masks. So that's a big thing. But a lot of the big things about COVID and how we address it are, things that everybody is grappling with. A thing about Menlo Park, when I think about, our businesses and people going out, a lot of people in our community have the luxury of not having to go out. So in wealthy communities like Menlo Park, a lot of people choose to play it safe. They can work from home. They can order everything online. So it's challenging then when we're trying to send two messages that we should, stimulate our economy and get back to work and support our businesses, but also stay home. So how do you navigate around there? Again, I'm thinking of, what are the levers that a city council person kind of has to pull because it's extremely complex and daunting. So one of the things I think that's really great going on right now are all these pilots for restaurants to use outdoor space. And I think the idea of trying things and removing regulations or barriers that would get in the way of small businesses trying new ideas that can either be pulled back if necessary or replicated if successful. I think the Silicon Valley is famous for its ability to innovate, and it's something that we really need to be doing right now in the face of COVID, and to watch and learn from others. The City of Menlo Park and Council people can be communicating and having the best information, the highest quality data disseminated to all of its residents through our neighborhood organizing groups that we have, just having a really good flow of information so that the whole community is rowing together, so that we all know, you know, regardless, wear a mask, really consistent communication. Another big thing that is impacting the city regarding COVID is obviously the city budget. And for those of you who are following the budget process here in Menlo Park, the city is anticipating a $12.7 million revenue shortfall over last year, which is huge for a city of our size. And that's mainly because our hotel tax, which we rely very heavily on, has incredibly decreased, and also our sales tax. So paying attention to the budget issues, knowing that we might have to revisit, and I know the city's planning on revisiting the budget kind of constantly, it's going to be ongoing. So looking at the hiring of the city manager, for those of you who don't know, we're probably going to be having a new city manager coming up, and that's going to be a decision that the new city council will probably be making. That's going to be critical to make sure we have the right management of the budget and to keep an eye on those issues.
Great. Okay. Time for one more question. I think we can squeeze it in. And this one is about climate. The climate crisis that affects all of us. How do we address it at the city level? What's the city's role?
So again, Tuesday night, I encourage, it's, I guess, a big night at City Council. They're going to be talking about both police reform and the climate action plan. So I encourage you all to attend who are interested in this topic. I watched the Environmental Quality Commission's last meeting in June, where Josie Gaylord, who I believe is on this call, gave an incredibly powerful, daunting yet optimistic overview of the climate situation and what we can expect and what we need to do in terms of action. And I really believe we need to take bold climate action. We can't say we're too busy on COVID or too busy with budget cuts. Climate can't wait. According to Josie's presentation, by 2070, 2100, the bay is expected to rise by maybe 3 to 6 feet, maybe even 10 feet. Large parts, if not all, of the Bellhaven neighborhood would be underwater, possibly up to 101, possibly areas of, you know, our city that we're not expecting. And that's not far away. 2100, you know, my kids are going to be in their 60s. Wait, no, that's not right. They'll be in their 90s. But by 2060, anyway, it's not that far away. And so we have to act now. You know, COVID has really taught us some lessons that we need to apply to climate action. One is that you got to listen to the scientists. You know, politicians have to weigh a lot of factors, but we have to first and foremost follow science. The second is that failing to act can have dire consequences. Just like a virus, you know, climate problems will increase exponentially if we don't do something about them. So the time to do bold climate action is now. And the optimistic news is that our city council enacted some REACH codes last year, which means that they are now having new building construction be almost completely electrified. So try to phase out natural gas. And when Menlo Park did that, it was pretty cutting edge and they were at the forefront. But what happened is because of a great organization named Menlo Spark, which Diane Bailey is a part of, and a lot of the people on this call, they didn't just come up with a REACH code and implement it locally. They used it as an example to spark action throughout the region and hopefully throughout the world. The idea is that Menlo Park is in the Silicon Valley, has so many thought leaders, and that if we can do things here, we can teach others how to do it. And now 32 cities in the area have enacted the same type of REACH code policy. So we might say, what can we in Menlo Park do to affect climate change when it's such a global issue? Well, first of all, we can't not do we can't just sit by and do nothing, but we have a chance of making big change. Another thing I want to say about climate change, it also has equity implications, because as I mentioned, the Belhaven community is going to be the first community hit by climate. And we know that vulnerable communities all over the world are the most in trouble with climate change. So it's also something we need to think about when we think of how we're going to address climate change. Not everyone can go out and buy a Tesla. So we have to be very thoughtful about rebates that we offer, and working with our regional partners on how we do these things. The other big thing we can do with climate change is really reducing our reliance on single occupancy vehicles. So making it safer to walk and bike. And to go back to housing, we can locate housing near jobs. So right now we have tons of people commuting into Menlo Park. If some of these people were allowed to live in Menlo Park, that would put less pollution in the air. So that's really our biggest opportunity. And I gotta put in a plug for e-bikes. I don't know if for all of these, you know, I ride an e-bike around town. It's the greatest thing ever. The more people we can get riding e-bikes, the more road space can be left over for those that will still need to drive, because not everybody's gonna end up walking and biking everywhere. I get that. So kind of coming back, and we can also do more with electrification too, I have to say, and solar. There's so many things we can do, but the point is we need to take bold action. And going back to safe routes, it just shows how interconnected all these issues. So I started my journey talking about safe routes. Then I said all these issues were interconnected. We've talked about police reform, we've talked about Black Lives Matter, we've talked about COVID and the budget, and now we're on climate. But it really goes back to, you know, this is all connected, and that's why the lenses that I'm trying to apply are really equity and sustainability. And there you go.
Wow, Jen. All right. Great. A+. Thank you for those thorough responses. Looking at the time, and I see we did get some good comments here too in the chat. So thank you, everyone. All right. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. This has been really, really great. We're still getting more encouraging comments in the chat, so that's really good. As part of Jen's all volunteer campaign, again, I want to thank everyone, and I hope this was informative to you if you are able to vote for District 3 representative, and also if you're in a position to donate. The campaign, you know, we're in a competitive race, and so we need to raise about maybe 3,000 more to get ourselves to this final stretch through to November. So if you're in a position to do so, that would be wonderful. You can go on jenwolosin.com and do that, and whatever we don't spend, Jen is going to donate to Second Harvest Food Bank of San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. So it will be well spent either way. So again, thank you, Jen.
Thank you, everybody, for your support, or for just coming to listen to find out more about me. And oh, that's a cool sign. And everyone have a great weekend. Don't forget to wear your mask and stay safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
You can download the comments. You can save them. Yeah.
And Rachel, we can still hear you.
Well, it wasn't me.
Awesome job.